Hey guys, so in my previous video on my illustration process and also the video I did on a vlog when I showed my work process again, I got quite a lot of questions asking how I make texture and how I introduce texture into my artwork, because it's quite a big thing for me. I don't feel comfortable with a piece of work unless it's quite textured. I think it gives it a bit more of a tactile feel, and it gives it almost like a handmade look even though it's a digital piece of artwork, because all my work starts from a pencil sketch and I always like to add my traditional print and things into it just to give it a little bit more like oomph, I guess. I don't know how else to explain that. So I thought I would do this quick video just showing how you can make your own texture brushes, and you can use any photo you have. So I'm going to take some photos now and show you what I will use, but you can use any photos you have. And what I think has also worked quite well is I've seen some people do it with watercolour. So you could draw an area of watercolour onto like a watercolour paper and you could make a texture brush from that, or you could use like a gritty texture, or the texture I use in my like normal portfolio work was ink. So what I did was I used an ink roller whilst I was at university and I had those facilities. But if you have like a roller thing, I just laid loads of ink onto a surface, ink rolled onto the roller, and then put it onto big sheets of paper, and depending on how much ink you had on the roller you could create some really lovely textures with that. So if you have that availability, definitely get into a print room and just play around with ink. But other than that, just think about the texture you want in your work. So if you want it quite gritty, use like sand, use stone, use maybe pencil textures. Like, just think of the textures you want, and then you can make textures brushes on those on Photoshop, which can be quite useful to add to digital work. So I'm going to stop rambling and I'm just going to go straight into this and show you how I do it. Let's go. So first things first, I would go out and take photographs of any textures you like. I just went around outside my house and took some photos of the ground, the wall, the stones, just to decide which I wanted to work with. But any are fine. And also, like I said, using photographs of your own work, like if you usually like working traditionally, it can be quite nice to take photographs of your watercolour textures. So here's the texture I chose, and it's just a zoom in of the pavement. So the first thing you do is you change the grayscale, just because you can't have colour in a brush, so it's just good to set that mode to grayscale. And then the next thing I do is play around with the levels. Now this totally changes the look of your brush. So if I want it to be quite a subtle brush, I would make it quite white, and the darker the brush, basically the white areas are going to be transparent and the dark areas are going to be where your colour will be. So if you keep it quite light with just a few elements of texture, of course it's going to be maybe a nice lighter texture which might actually be more obvious. And if you do a very dark texture brush like I'm doing for this one, I'm trying to get quite a subtle effect, can't speak. So when I layer that into my artwork, it will have quite a very subtle texture to it, because you'll mostly see the ink, if that makes any sense. So yeah, lighter texture, you'll probably be able to see a little bit more when you layer it over another colour, and the darker texture is more subtle. So for this one, I'm really moving the level quite far over and getting it nice and dark. And that's all done. So the next thing you do is you go edit, once you're happy with that, and you define brush preset and give that a name. I'm just going to call it grain pavement, just so I remember what it is. And then that's it. You have your texture brush. It's so easy to make texture brushes on Photoshop, but I feel like unis and stuff don't really teach that often. So then you just open a new document and there you have it. I'm going to make it in red so you can see the texture. Zoom in, and this is what I was talking about. This is it with no editing. So literally just a stamp of the texture, which to be honest is how I usually work. The other little one is the texture I usually use, which has a lot more white in it. So as you can see, because I kept it quite dark, it's a very subtle, grainy texture, which was actually what I wanted for this one. So there I have it. And I mean, you could just use it in its original form, but the way I would usually use texture brushes is, this is again with no editing of the brush. I will always work over a solid colour. So I always have my coloured piece how I like it, and then I go over it with my texture brush just to give it some grain and some more saturated colours. So that's how it's looking. But what you can do now is first I'm just going to make it a bit darker so you can see the texture more. So because this one is quite a subtle brush, I'm not used to working with a subtle brush, you kind of do need to use quite a dark colour. So after you've made your brush, you will want to edit it. So in the top left hand corner, you can click just next to the brush, that little icon, which has a little image of a brush in it, and that will bring you up to your brush settings. From here you can just click which one you'd like to edit, and you can change your texture. I find increasing the scale is quite nice, just so you can play around. So you can make it darker here in the editing, like post-production of your brush. You can change the scale, you can make it flow so it's not so jittery, you can add a jitter if you want. You can really play around with like the spacing and the scattering of your brush. And honestly, I think at this stage, the options are really endless. And if you've never made a brush before, I'd recommend just playing around with the editing. Open up a large document on your Photoshop and just try out new things. Try making some changes, playing around with the brush, and just keep adjusting it to find bits that you like. Like, there's so many different bits in here that, to be honest, even I don't know how to use. So I would usually just do it visually, just try things out, and you will find what works for you. So I'm just going to show you how I would use the brush. So here's a piece I'm currently working on. It is a little image of the London Underground. But as you can see, the girl has the texture brush I've used in this piece is the light brush I've been using, which is the ink brush. So I'm just going to try my new little pavement brush. And the way I work is I layer a block colour over the top first, and then I will just go in with my brush. And again, I'm having to darken it just because I have made this brush a lot more subtle than what I'm used to working at. But there you have it. Nice grainy brush that can go into your artwork and just make it look a little bit more textured and a bit more tactile. So that's pretty much it. That's how I make texture brushes on Photoshop and how I add them to my artwork. Obviously the options are endless, you could sit there for hours and hours playing around with all the settings. You can play around with the size, you can make them flow more, you can increase the look of them. There's so many options, so it's really worth just once you have that texture photo and you've made that brush, just play around with the settings, sit there for a while and just try out new things, make some copies of the brush as well, and just really experiment with it, because it's so nice having your own brush which you've handmade. I think it really helps make you feel that the artwork's a bit more yours, and it gives a little bit of a personal element, and also it's just really customizable, so you don't have to use brushes. I mean, there are wonderful brushes out there, there's great already made Photoshop brushes you can download and buy some amazing brushes, but I think it can be really fun to make your own. So if you make your own brushes, let me know how this goes. If this was helpful, please let me know. And if you like videos like this, illustration videos, I also do illustration vlogs, and I'm going to do some more tutorials. So if you like these kind of videos, please let me know and give this video a like and subscribe if you're into this kind of thing, and I'll see you again soon. Bye bye guys.